The stars had watched humanity fall 3,000 years ago, and now they watched the Vorath return to claim what remained of the broken world called Earth Commander Kethfer stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Surrounded by holographic displays showing 10,000 warships in perfect formation around the small blue planet below, he remembered the stories his ancestors had passed down through generations. Tales of how the Vorath had conquered this world in just 17 hours. How the primitive humans had fired their pathetic nuclear weapons and chemical projectiles. How they had screamed and begged and died in their millions. The Vorath had been merciful in their own way, deciding not to exterminate the species entirely, but instead declaring them a contained species, quarantined to their single world, forbidden from developing technology beyond simple farming tools, watched by orbital monitors that would destroy any attempt at advancement for 3,000 years. Humanity had sent no signals into space, built no ships, made no demands, and offered no resistance. The galaxy had moved on and forgotten about the primitive apes trapped on their little blue prison. Now Kethfor had come to finish what his ancestors had started, to formally dissolve the quarantine and strip Earth of its remaining resources, its water and minerals, and whatever else might prove useful to the ever-expanding Vorath Dominion. Open a channel to the surface, Kethfor commanded, his 4 arms folded across his armored chest, his reptilian eyes gleaming with anticipation. Let them know their masters have returned. His communications officer worked the controls, and Kethfor prepared to deliver the speech he had practiced for this moment. A declaration of absolute dominion over a species that had surely devolved into primitive tribes by now. But before he could speak, a transmission came through from the planet below, and it was in perfect Vorathi, spoken without accent or hesitation. "We have been waiting for you." Kethfor froze, his prepared speech dying in his throat as a human face appeared on the main view screen. She was old by human standards, with silver hair pulled back from a face lined with age. But her eyes were sharp and bright, and held no fear whatsoever. "I am Ambassador Yuki Tanaka," the human woman said, her voice calm and measured. "And on behalf of the United Human Collective, I welcome you back to our solar system. You speak our language," Kethfor managed to say, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing and hearing. "We speak 17 galactic languages fluently," the woman replied with a slight smile. "We have had 3,000 years to learn." Kethfor recovered his composure and straightened to his full height, towering over the bridge crew as he addressed the human on the screen. "Your linguistic achievements are irrelevant," he declared. "The Vorath Dominion has returned to claim this world, and you will submit to our authority immediately or face complete annihilation." The human woman nodded slowly, as if she had expected exactly these words. "I understand your position, Commander," she said, "but I must inform you that you have misunderstood the nature of this encounter." "There is nothing to misunderstand," Kethfor snapped. "You are a contained species, primitive and helpless, and we have 10,000 warships ready to reduce your cities to ash." "Yes, I can see your fleet," the woman said, and her smile grew wider. "It is quite impressive, truly a testament to Vorath military might." She paused, and something in her expression made Kethfor feel a chill run down his spine, despite the warmth of the bridge. "However," she continued, "this is not a negotiation. This is a courtesy. You have 72 of your hours to withdraw all Vorath forces from this system." The bridge erupted in laughter, officers and crew members, alike unable to contain their amusement at the absurdity of a contained species issuing ultimatums to the greatest military force in the quadrant. But Kethfor did not laugh. He stared at the human woman on the screen, at her calm confidence, at the complete absence of fear in her ancient eyes, and he felt something he had not felt in centuries of military service. He felt uncertain. "You threaten us," he said slowly. You, a species that has been forbidden from space travel for 3 millennia, threaten the Vorath Dominion. I do not threaten, the woman replied. I inform. I give you the opportunity to leave peacefully, to return to your empire and tell them that Earth is no longer a contained world. And if we refuse this generous offer, Kethver asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm, then you will learn what humanity has become. The woman said Simply Kither made his decision in that moment. A decision born of pride and anger, and the absolute certainty that no contained species could possibly pose a threat to Vorath supremacy. Communications officer, he barked. Broadcast to all ships and to the planet below. He turned to face the view screen directly. His eyes locked on the human ambassador. By the authority vested in me by the Vorath High Council, I hereby declare a state of war between the Vorath Dominion and the species known as humanity. Your world will be conquered, your people will be enslaved, and your defiance will be remembered as the foolish gesture of a doomed race. The human woman listened to his declaration without any change in her expression when he finished. She simply nodded once. So be it, she said. We accept your declaration of war. Then she did something that Kethver would remember for the rest of his very short life. She smiled, not a smile of fear or desperation or false bravery, but a smile of genuine satisfaction, even joy, as if she had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Commander Kethver, she said, you have no idea what you have just done, but you will learn very soon. The transmission ended, and Kethver stood in silence on his bridge, surrounded by officers who were already celebrating their inevitable victory. But deep in his chest, in the place where instinct lived, Kethver felt something cold and heavy settle into his heart. He looked out at the blue planet below, so small and fragile against the darkness of space, and he wondered what secrets it held after 3,000 years of silence across that small blue world. In cities, the Vorath sensors somehow could not detect. In installations hidden deep beneath mountains and oceans, 8 billion humans looked up at the stars and smiled the same smile their ambassador had worn. The waiting was over, the enemy had returned, and humanity was ready. The Vorath invasion began at dawn on the 3rd day, and Commander Kethver watched from orbit as his forces descended upon the Earth. Like a storm of fire and metal dropships, by the thousands fell through the atmosphere, their hulls glowing red from the heat of entry, carrying millions of Vorath soldiers, armed with plasma weapons and powered armor that could tear through concrete like paper. Behind them came the bombardment ships, raining kinetic projectiles down upon the major population centers that the orbital scans had identified. Each impact creating an explosion visible from space. Kethver expected to hear screaming on the communication channels, the panicked cries of humans begging for mercy, the sounds of a civilization crumbling under the weight of Vorath military might. Instead, he heard nothing but silence. Ground forces report, he commanded, his voice sharp with impatience. Commander, came the reply from General Yethral. Leading the primary assault force, the cities are empty. Kethver leaned forward in his command chair, certain he had misheard. Repeat that? General, the cities are empty, Commander, all of them. We have landed in what our scans showed as population centers of millions. But there is no one here, no humans, no animals. Nothing but abandoned buildings and empty streets. The bridge fell silent as the implications of this report sank in. 8 billion humans had lived on this planet, according to the old records. 8 billion people who should have been running and screaming and dying under the Vorath assault, but they were gone. Expand the search, Kethver ordered. They must be hiding somewhere, in bunkers or caves or underground shelters. Find them. For hours, the Vorath forces spread across the planet, searching every building, every tunnel, every possible hiding place their sensors could detect. They found abandoned homes with meals still on tables, Vehicles sitting in streets with their doors open. Schools with books still on desks and toys scattered on playgrounds, but no humans. Then the scouts began to report something else. Something that made no sense at all. "Commander," General Yethral said, his voice carrying an edge of fear that Kethfer had never heard before. "We are detecting tunnel networks beneath the surface, massive ones, extending down for kilometers. Send reconnaissance teams to investigate," Kethfer ordered. "We have." "Commander, that is the problem. The teams are not coming back." Kethfer felt that cold sensation in his chest again. The same instinctive warning that had troubled him during his conversation with the human ambassador. "What do you mean they are not coming back?" "I mean exactly that. Commander, we send teams into the tunnels and they simply vanish. No communications, no distress signals, no bodies. They just disappear. Then send more teams with heavier support. I have sent 47 teams so far." "Commander, none have returned." Before Kethvar could respond, the main view screen flickered, and the face of Ambassador Yuka Tanaka appeared once again. "Good morning." "Commander," she said pleasantly, "I hope you slept well." "Where are your people?" Kethvar demanded. "What have you done with them?" "They are safe," the ambassador replied, "which is more than I can say for your soldiers. Speaking of which, I wanted to show you something." The screen changed, displaying images that made Kethvar's blood run cold. Underground cities stretched for hundreds of kilometers, lit by artificial suns, filled with billions of humans going about their daily lives in towers of glass and steel orbital. Shipyards hidden in dimensions that Voraith sensors could not perceive, producing vessels of elegant and terrifying design. Weapons laboratories where scientists worked on devices that seemed to violate the fundamental laws of physics. Soldiers in advanced armor undergoing combat training, moving with speed and precision that no unmodified human should possess. "Did you truly believe," the ambassador asked as the images continued to play, "that a species capable of splitting the atom would simply accept captivity?" More images appeared on the screen. "Did you think that the people who had walked on their own moon, who had dreamed of the stars since they first looked up at the night sky, would simply give up and accept their fate as a contained species?" Kethvar watched in growing horror as the true scope of human development became clear. "You gave us 3,000 years. Commander, 3,000 years to prepare for your return. Every single day of those 3,000 years, we worked and planned and built. We taught our children that the enemy would return someday, and we taught them to be ready." The ambassador smiled that terrible smile again. "You should have killed us all when you had the chance. Because now it is far too late." The lights on the flagship flickered, and Kethvar spun around to face his bridge crew. "What is happening?" "Unknown energy signature detected on board, Commander," an officer reported, his voice trembling. "Multiple signatures. They are everywhere." A sound echoed through the ship, a low humming vibration that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "They are here." Someone whispered. The bridge doors opened, and figures stepped through, human figures in sleek black armor that seemed to absorb the light around them, moving with perfect silence despite their heavy equipment. Kethvar reached for his sidearm, but before his hand could touch the weapon, he found himself staring down the barrel of a human rifle that had appeared centimeters from his face. The human holding the rifle was young, with cold eyes and steady hands. "Commander Kethvar," the soldier said in flawless Vorathi, "by order of the United Human Collective, you are now a prisoner of war. Your fleet is being neutralized as we speak, and your invasion is over." Kethvar looked past the soldier to the view screen, which now showed his mighty armada in chaos ships were going dark one by one, their power systems failing, their weapons going offline, their crews being subdued by human soldiers who had appeared on every single vessel simultaneously. 10,000 warships. the pride of the Vorath Dominion, brought to their knees in a matter of minutes. "How?" Kethver whispered. Unable to comprehend what he was witnessing, the human soldier almost smiled. "You really have no idea what we have become, do you?" On the view screen, the ambassador appeared one final time. "This is humanity, Commander. This is what 3,000 years of anger and patience and preparation look like. Remember this day. Tell your people about it when we send you home. Tell them that Earth is no longer contained." Her smile faded, replaced by an expression of absolute resolve. "And tell them this is only the beginning." The galaxy watched in stunned disbelief as news of the Vorath defeat spread from system to system, carried by traders and diplomats and refugees fleeing the impossible truth. The Vorath Dominion, conquerors of 1,000 worlds, masters of a military machine that had crushed civilizations for 10,000 years, had been brought to their knees in 6 days by a species that should have been primitive and helpless. 6 days. The galactic communication networks exploded with questions and theories and wild speculation about what had happened at Earth, how a contained species had managed to develop technology that could neutralize an entire armada, where the humans had been hiding for 3 millennia. But the truth was far stranger than anything the galaxy could imagine. Admiral Chun Wei stood on the bridge of the Unconquered, flagship of the Argent Fleet, watching the last Vorath dreadnought surrender to human boarding parties. He was an old man by the standards of previous generations, but the genetic modifications and life extension treatments that humanity had developed in secret meant that his mind was still sharp, and his body still strong despite his 300 years of life. Behind him stood the other admirals of the Argent Fleet, commanders of 12,000 warships that had been built in shipyards hidden in the spaces between dimensions, crewed by soldiers who had trained for this war since childhood. "The Vorath fleet is secure," his tactical officer reported. "All enemy vessels had been neutralized. Casualties on both sides were minimal as you ordered." Chun Wei nodded slowly, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders that he had carried his entire life. "Signal the colonies," he said quietly. "Operation Long Memory is complete." He paused, letting the moment sink in before continuing. "Begin Phase 2 across the galaxy, in 100 hidden locations that no alien sensor had ever detected." Human colonies received the signal and began to move for 3,000 years. Humanity had not simply hidden underground on Earth. They had spread. The first generation after the Vorath containment had been the hardest, developing technology in secret while pretending to be the primitive farmers the aliens expected, smuggling scientists and engineers into hidden bunkers where they worked in darkness to unlock the secrets of the universe. Second generation had made the breakthrough that changed everything, discovering how to fold space and slip into dimensions that existed parallel to normal reality, dimensions where Vorath sensors could not follow. By the third generation, humanity had established its first off-world colony, a hidden settlement built in fold space near a distant star, invisible to the galaxy that thought them contained. By the 10th generation, there were 50 colonies. By the 100th, there were 200, and now, 3,000 years after their supposed defeat, humanity possessed a shadow empire that spanned half the galaxy, hidden in the spaces between spaces. Watching and waiting and preparing, Chun Wei remembered his grandmother's stories about the early days, the desperate secrecy, the fear that the Vorath would discover what humanity was doing and return to finish the job of extermination. But the Vorath had been arrogant, so certain of their superiority that they never bothered to check on their contained species, never sent scouts or inspectors to verify that the humans were still primitive and broken, that arrogance had given humanity the time they needed. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "we are receiving transmissions from across the network. All colonies report ready for Phase 2 deployment." Chun Wei walked to the main view screen, which now displayed a map of the galaxy with human positions marked in blue There were so many blue markers, scattered across hundreds of star systems, representing billions of humans who had lived their entire lives knowing that this day would come. 3,000 years, he said softly. My family has served in the military for 3,000 years, waiting for the day we could stop hiding, waiting for the day we could stand up and announce ourselves to the galaxy. He turned to face his bridge crew, men and women who shared that same generational burden, that same ancient purpose. Today, we stop waiting. He looked back at the map, at the blue markers that represented humanity's true power. But the Vorath were never our true enemy. They were just the prison guards, the enforcers who kept us contained, the real power in this galaxy, the ones who allowed our subjugation and profited from it. They are still out there. The map shifted, showing the territories of the Galactic Concord, the alliance of 12 elder species that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000,000 years. The Vorath were members of the Concord. Chun Wei continued. When they conquered Earth, the Concord did nothing. When they declared us a contained species, the Concord approved it. Some of them even traded with the Vorath for resources stolen from our world. His voice hardened. The Vorath were our test, a way to prove that our technology worked, that our soldiers were ready, that our strategy was sound. And we passed that test. He raised his hand and pointed at the Concord territories on the map. Now we move to the real objective. Not conquest. We are not like them, but recognition, respect. A place at the table where the future of this galaxy is decided. A new transmission came through, and Ambassador Tanaka appeared on the screen. Admiral Chun, she said. The Vorath survivors have been processed and are ready for transport. They will carry our message back to their homeworld. And the message for the Concord. Chun Wei, asked the ambassador, smiled. The same patient smile that had unnerved Commander Cathfer, already sent. The Concord is convening an emergency session. They are terrified. They have never seen anything like what we did to the Vorath fleet. And they want to know what we want. What we want is simple, Xin Wei said. We want them to understand that the rules have changed. We want them to understand that humanity is no longer a contained species to be ignored and exploited. He took a deep breath. We want them to understand that after 3,000 years of silence, we have a great deal to say. The Argent fleet began to move. 12,000 ships slipping into fold space, traveling through dimensions that should have been impossible to navigate, heading toward the heart of galactic civilization, and behind them, on 100 hidden worlds. Billions of humans emerged from the shadows for the first time in 3 millennia. The long game was over. The new game was about to begin. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Concord had stood for 500,000 years. A massive station floating in the heart of neutral space, where the 12 elder species had gathered to decide the fate of civilizations today. For the first time in its long history, the hall was filled with fear. Representatives of a dozen species sat in their designated sections, beings of crystal and light and living metal, and forms that defied easy description. All of them united in their shock at what had happened to the Vorath. Round the transparent walls of the station, they could see the human fleet. Thousands of ships had emerged from fold space over the past hour, filling the void around the station in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with technology that the Concord scientists could not understand. Their weapons powered and ready. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka walked through the great doors of the assembly hall, flanked by 2 human guards in their sleek black armor, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence that fell over the gathered representatives. She was old, older than any unmodified human had ever been. Her silver hair and lined face, a testament to the centuries she had spent preparing for this moment. Behind her, displayed on massive screens throughout the hall, the human fleet continued to arrive. Ship after ship emerging from invisible dimensions. Distinguished members of the Galactic Concord, she began. her voice carrying clearly through the hall's perfect acoustics. I am Ambassador Yuki Tanaka, speaking on behalf of the United Human Collective, and I have come to address certain matters of historical importance. The eldest member of the Concord rose to speak, a being of living crystal named Veth Kaller, who had existed for 500,000 years and had seen the rise and fall of 1,000 species. Human, Veth Kaller said, their voice like chiming bells. You have destroyed a member species of this Concord. You have demonstrated military capabilities that threaten the stability of the entire galaxy. And you have arrived at this sacred hall with weapons displayed. Explain yourself. Tanaka smiled, and several of the younger representatives shuddered at the sight. Distinguished Veth Kaller, she replied, I did not destroy the Vorith. I neutralized their military forces with minimal casualties and returned their surviving soldiers and commanders to their homeworld. The Vorith Dominion still exists, merely without the ability to threaten Earth ever again. You speak as if this is a reasonable action, another representative interjected, a towering being of living metal called Vexori. You have crippled a major galactic power. I have defended my people, Tanaka corrected calmly. Which brings me to the matter I wished to discuss with this assembly. She raised her hand, and the screens around the hall changed, displaying historical records that the Concord had thought long forgotten 3,000 years ago. The Vorith Dominion invaded Earth, a planet occupied by a young species just beginning to explore space. In 17 hours, they conquered our world, killed hundreds of millions of our people, and declared humanity a contained species. The images shifted, showing the aftermath of that invasion, cities in ruins, humans in chains, orbital monitors circling Earth like prison guards. This Concord approved that action, Tanaka continued, her voice hardening. You voted unanimously to support the containment of humanity. You allowed the Vorith to strip our world of resources, to enslave our ancestors, to condemn our species to what should have been a slow extinction. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some of you did more than merely approve, Tanaka said. And the screens displayed trade records and financial transactions. You profited from our subjugation. You bought resources stolen from Earth. You invested in Vorith military ventures. You built wealth on the suffering of my people. The hall was silent. So I stand before you today not to apologize for defending my species, Tanaka declared, but to inform you that the rules of this galaxy have changed. She gestured to the screens, which now showed a map of human territory, the shadow empire that had grown in secret for 3 millennia. Humanity is no longer contained. We are no longer quarantined. We possess territory, military power, and technological capabilities that rival or exceed any member of this Concord. And we are no longer asking for permission to exist. Veth Kaller's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. What exactly do you want? Human. 3 things, Tanaka replied, holding up her fingers. First, a seat on this Concord, with full voting rights and all associated privileges. Second, a renegotiation of every treaty and territorial agreement made during the 3,000 years of our absence. Third, formal recognition from every member species that humanity is no longer a contained species, but a sovereign galactic power. And if we refuse these demands, Vexori asked, their metallic body creaking with tension. The human ships outside powered their weapons, and the station's sensors screamed warnings about energy levels that should have been impossible. Tanaka's smile faded, replaced by an expression of absolute seriousness. Then we will demonstrate what else humanity learned during 3,000 years of patient preparation. I do not wish for that, and I suspect neither do you. She let the threat hang in the air for a long moment before continuing. But I want to be clear about something. We are not here for revenge. Revenge is wasteful and inefficient. We are here for justice, for recognition, For a future where humanity is not merely surviving in the shadows, but thriving as equals among the stars. She looked around the hall. Meeting the eyes of every representative, you can choose to see us as enemies, as a threat to be contained again if you find the means. Or you can choose to see us as potential allies, as a species with much to offer the galactic community. Her voice softened slightly. We have spent 3,000 years preparing for war, learning to survive against impossible odds, developing technologies that your scientists cannot even comprehend. Imagine what we could accomplish if we turned that energy toward peace. The representatives murmured among themselves, their various languages, creating a symphony of confusion and debate finally. Veth Kaller spoke again. We will need time to discuss your demands among ourselves. You have 12 hours. Tanaka replied. My fleet will remain in position until then. She turned to leave, then paused at the doors. I suggest you use that time wisely. The next 3,000 years of galactic history depend on the decision you make today. With that, she walked out of the hall, leaving the most powerful beings in the galaxy to contemplate a future they had never imagined possible. 100 years had passed since humanity announced itself to the galaxy, and everything had changed. The Galactic Concord had accepted humanity's demands after only 6 hours of debate, choosing wisdom over pride, cooperation over conflict. And in the century that followed, the galaxy had been transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka, now over 500 years old, and still vital thanks to human life extension technology, stood before the Memorial of Remembrance on the restored Earth. The memorial was a wall of black stone stretching for kilometers, etched with the names of every human who had died during the Vorath occupation, every scientist who had worked themselves to death in secret laboratories, every soldier who had fallen during the Liberation War, every person who had sacrificed so that humanity could survive. 10 billion names carved in stone, a testament to the price of survival. Behind the memorial, the city of New Geneva rose into the sky, its towers gleaming with clean energy, its streets filled with humans and aliens alike, walking together in peace. Earth had been restored over the past century. The damage of the Vorath occupation healed. The planet transformed into a garden world of forests and oceans and cities that existed in harmony with nature. And humanity had not merely taken its place among the stars. They had changed what it meant to be part of the galactic community. Human technology, freely shared, had elevated a dozen struggling species from poverty and desperation. Medical techniques developed in secret laboratories had cured plagues that had ravaged alien worlds for millennia. Human art and music and philosophy had spread through cultures that had grown stagnant over eons, inspiring new movements and ideas and ways of thinking. But humanity had also made clear that they would never be subjugated again. The Argent Fleet remained the largest and most powerful military force in the galaxy. Human soldiers were recognized as the finest warriors among all species, and human scientists continued to push the boundaries of what was possible. They had become what they had always dreamed of being, not conquerors but guardians, not rulers but partners, a species that protected the weak and stood against those who would exploit and oppress. Tanaka traced her fingers over one of the names on the memorial, the name of her great-grandmother, who had been a child during the Vorath invasion and had grown up to become one of the first scientists in the secret underground laboratories. Ambassador Tanaka. She turned to see a young Vorath approaching, a child no more than 10 years old, dressed in the simple clothing of a refugee. The Vorath Dominion had collapsed in the decades after their defeat, torn apart by internal conflict and the shame of their failure, and millions of Vorath civilians had fled their crumbling empire. Many of them, finding shelter in human territory, humanity had accepted them, because humanity understood what it meant to be displaced and desperate and afraid. Yes, young one, Tanaka said gently, kneeling to meet the child's eyes. I have a question. the Vorith child said, their voice hesitant. My teachers told me the story of how your people defeated my ancestors. And there is something I do not understand. Ask your question. When Commander Kethver declared war on humanity, when he threatened to destroy your world and enslave your people, everyone says that humans smiled. They say that across your whole planet, humans looked at the stars and smiled. The child's eyes were wide with confusion. Why? Why would you smile when facing destruction? Were you not afraid? Tanaka was silent for a long moment, memories flooding through her mind. Memories of the centuries she had spent preparing for that moment. The weight she had carried, knowing that someday the enemy would return. We were afraid, she admitted. For 3,000 years, every generation of humanity lived with fear. We knew that the Vorith might return at any moment. We knew that all our preparations might not be enough. We lived with that fear from the day we were born until the day we died. She stood and looked up at the sky, at the stars that now held human colonies and human ships and human hope. But we also lived with purpose. Every generation knew that their work mattered, that their sacrifices would help their children and their grandchildren survive. We built something together across 3,000 years. A legacy of preparation and patience and determination. She looked back at the Vorith child. When your ancestors declared war, they did not frighten us. They freed us. All those years of waiting and preparing, all that weight and burden and fear. It was finally over. The enemy had returned. And we could finally stop hiding and start fighting. Her expression softened. We smiled because we knew what we had become. We had taken our greatest weakness, our isolation and containment, and turned it into our greatest strength. We had used every single day of those 3,000 years to prepare for that moment. The child was quiet, processing her words. What had you become? They finally asked. Tanaka smiled. Not the terrible patient smile she had worn when facing Commander Kethfor, but a warm, genuine smile that came from a place of peace. Survivors, she said. We became what we always were, what we always will be. No matter what challenges we face, no matter what enemies threaten us. Humanity survives, humanity adapts, humanity endures. She placed a gentle hand on the child's shoulder. And now we have learned something even more important. Now we have learned how to use our strength to protect others, to lift up those who are struggling, to make the galaxy a better place for everyone, even for those who were once our enemies. The child looked up at her with something like hope in their eyes. Even for us, even for you, Tanaka confirmed. The past cannot be changed, but the future is always being written. And we get to choose what that future looks like. She turned back to the memorial, to the 10 billion names carved in stone, to the weight of history that humanity carried with them always. We remember the past so that we can build a better future. That is the lesson humanity learned during our long silence. And that is the gift we now share with the galaxy. The sun was setting over New Geneva, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. And in the distance, human ships rose toward the stars, carrying hope and technology and the promise of tomorrow to a galaxy that was still learning what it meant to have humanity. Among them, the long silence was over. The long dawn had finally begun.